Here, new episode of Chordplay. This is the Chords of Budgie, and I've had some requests to feature this pioneering and legendary hard rock and metal band, and they formed in Wales in 1967, which was technically a year before Black Sabbath formed, even though Black Sabbath actually technically released 2 albums before Budgie released their first album. They were a formed band before Black Sabbath, technically. 11 studio albums, 6 live albums, 5 compilations, and 1 EP. Budgie's definitely legendary. So in the guitar department, especially in the 70s, we have the legendary guitarist Tony Borge. And in more recent incarnations of Budgie, Craig Goldie was a guitarist for a while, also Andy James. But this lesson is going to be a tribute to 70s Budgie and Tony Borge. So Budgie definitely has a long history of influencing hard rock and metal bands, and there's a lot of really famous bands that eclipsed, the popularity of Budgie that covered some of Budgie's songs. That includes Metallica, Iron Maiden, Soundgarden, Van Halen. There's tons of groups. So here's an image with a few of those covers of popular bands covering Budgie music. So the music and chord-based examples in this episode came from 4 Budgie albums, and I prepared for this lesson the way I always do. I went all the way back to their first album and then just slowly started moving through their albums and releases. And we're not going to leave the 70s, so it's all Tony Borge, in this episode. But they definitely have some great music that I didn't feature in this lesson. But anyway, just a heads up, and here's the album covers, from the music that I pulled for this lesson. Alright, with the opening, that was the song Nude Disintegrating Parachutist Woman, and I honestly don't really know what's going on with that song title, but I like it. And it starts really quiet, like this. Just single notes, that G to A, and then I'm hearing a C to D slide, and then that G to A again, and then there's a pause, and then there's 3 A5s, and then it's G to G sharp, right? So you're going to play that 4 times, quiet like that, then it gets loud. You do that 4 times, then the riff changes and we're moving, from A to D. So that D riff's just single notes, that C to D, and then you're grabbing that F. Back to that A riff. And then we're heading to the 5 chord, E. So that's the E part there, that D to E back and forth, and then go to C. And then slide into that D, you're going to grab the D octave, and then grab that C note. And then it's like a C power chord to a D power chord. And then you do everything again right there. So it's Interesting riff, cool song, and you got to think that came out in 1971, even though technically Sabbath was on the scene, definitely Zeppelin before them, but Budgie does sound like a hybrid between Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin, at least to my ears. Next up's the song Guts. This is also from the first Budgie album, and the previous example and this one were tuned down a half step, and then the next two examples are tuned down a whole step, and then the end of this lesson's back to a half step. So I did give you the heads up at the beginning, like the various tunings. Most of this lesson is tuned down a half step, but then the middle two examples are tuned down a whole step, and I'll give you a heads up when we get there. But Guts is like this. So super heavy, that G, F sharp, that F, and then the low E. And you're going to walk down to that low E open, slide into this B note, then you've got a G to G sharp trill right there on the D string. Then do that riff again, descending. And the second time, just slide into that B and then catch that D note right there, and then repeat that riff. That, when it runs its course, then you're just doing E to A back to E. And repeat that. That's like the basic, flow of Guts right there. Next up's the song Rockin' Man. This came from the album Squawk, and this time we're tuned down a whole step. Check this out, it's really cool. Something like that. So really interesting, that growling, whole step down tuning, which you got to think for this, like early 70s or whatever, nobody was tuning like that. Sabbath was, and Budgie was, but then the rest of the world caught up about a decade later. But we're doing... So like that low E open to the E octave right there, and then you distinctly hear the Hendrix chord there, E7 sharp 9 with vibrato. He kind of shakes it. And then right there, low E, B, B flat, A to that G. Runs its course, then go to B right there. Just think like B blues, like the blues scale. And we got this B power chord, then you're rolling in like the blues scale. Like that. And a double stop bend there on the 9th on the G and the B. Just kind of bend it to the sky and then start it over. Same thing in A right there, A5, and then like a little part of A, blues scale. And then you've got, so right right there. It's like that D to E, and then you double that C to D, and then the E, G, F sharp to F, and then you end with the Hendrix chord. Really cool song, and that's a cool riff, and it's really cool hearing that heavy, low tuning in the early 70s. Next up's the song Drugstore Woman. This is also from the album Squawk, and this is also tuned down a whole step, and I actually just posted this on my Facebook page last night. Totally kicks ass like this. Something like that. So once again, tune down a whole step, this B power chord up to that D, back to that B. And then like the low E open, that B note, back to that low E open, then the F to F sharp right there. The same riff to E. Now we're going to the 4 chord. Do the same thing, but over a set of strings. Right, that open A to that E, back to the open A, and then the A sharp to B. And then right there, go right back to that B riff. 5 chord, that F sharp. There's like a little lead lick there, right there, like B minor pentatonic. And then the E. Right there, another lead lick in B minor pentatonic. And then end up on that B riff. And then you end up on the Hendrix chord right there, that F sharp 7 sharp 9. Next up's the famous Crash Course in Brain Surgery. This came from the album In for the Kill, and Metallica did a very famous cover of this song, and this is tuned down a half step, so we're back in half step tuning down. Something like this. Something like that. So we're actually starting with this chromatic kind of open string thing in the beginning, like this. Pretty basic stuff right there. Just a 2-finger riff, really. You're gonna do 4 of those, and then you've got this and then you're going to basically bash this E5 into F sharp 5 and then start chugging that F sharp 5. And then come down F sharp minor pentatonic. Like that. And then that E to F. And then right back into that E F sharp, power chord riff. Then you're going to mimic that single note riff, but now with power chords. That F sharp to E, and that C sharp to B, that A to F sharp, and then it's an E, let it ring, F, let it ring, and then it keeps going, of course. I just ended on F sharp right there. But cool riff, cool song, and I really dig, like the way the riff's kind of, like just moshing through there. kicks ass. Next up's the song I Can't See My Feelings from the album Bandoliers, and Iron Maiden actually covered this song. Something like this. Something like that. So strum this open position G 3 times, a D5 over A, and then that big F down there. And then you're going to start, basically lifting up that F root note to the low E open, and then you're kind of chugging that right there. And you got to think like how heavy that was for like the early to mid 70s or whatever. Like nobody was playing like that back then. Kind of a short and sweet and simple riff, but definitely very influential, and Iron Maiden covered it too. Last but not least is the song Napoleon Bona Parts 1 and 2. This is also from the album Bandoliers. We're still tuned down a half step for this one, and it's like this eerie fingerstyle, like clean guitar thing. I think it actually might be an acoustic guitar. I'm just going to play it on an electric guitar here. But that's one thing that really surprised me about Budgie's music, because honestly I dove deeper into Budgie's music and albums than I ever have before to make this lesson. And there was a lot of acoustic stuff, a lot of clean guitar chords and like nylon string guitars and stuff. And I wasn't really expecting that alongside all the sludgy hard rock riffs. But this is one of those clean things, like this. Section, also an A minor section. We're going to take a look at that A minor section too. But you can see it's just open strings and then fretted notes along the A string right there. So the fretted E and then the B and high E open, then the G open with the B and high E open, and then that fretted E. And that's the pattern, like this. Right? One more time. And I'm actually lining up my fingers here on the A string, and I'm going to use all my fret hand fingers. I mean, you technically could just use one finger or something, just kind of move down. But I like to challenge my, my fret hand and my technique when I play stuff like this. So it's simple, but I'm technically making it harder than it actually is, like that. And then go down to that D sharp right there. That's, that's an implied E minor. And with that D sharp, it's like an E minor major 7. Moving down to that D, it's like an E minor 7. And then down to that C sharp, that's like an E minor 6 implied. Right? So you're doing it like this. Right? Just the descending root note with those open strings on top. Times. The last time you're doing this, right? It's like that C sharp to the open A, the G, that F sharp, and then right there it switches to A minor, right? So now we're doing that's in the A minor add 9, like that. So it's the fretted A note. We're also fretting that C note on the G, and the B and the high E are open. So it's the fretted A, B and high E string, then that fretted C, B and high E string, and then that fretted A again, like this. Right? Then lower that A down there, the G sharp. Now it's an implied A minor major 9. Right? Bring that down. Now it's just an A minor 9 with that G note there. And then lower that to F sharp. Now it's an A minor 6/9. Like that. So it's kind of mimicking what we had in E, but now it's an A, right? that in E, but now in A. Or, like that. And after you do that little walk down, that F sharp, the open D, C to B, and you're playing that B and high E open, it goes back to E, right? I like working on parts like that because it's not hard to play. It's just kind of a good like warm up. You know, I'm challenging my fret hand by using all my fret hand fingers. It's also a good kind of low impact finger picking, you know, workout right there too. Cool song. All right, that's going to wrap this look at the Chords of Budgie. Definitely a very influential and important band. And I want to thank the viewers out there because I had a pack of viewers that just have patiently and consistently asked for Budgie. And I saw those requests. I just hadn't really wrapped my, my head around their music. And I'd never really dove in to their albums as deeply as I did to make this lesson. You know, I heard certain songs. I heard Crash Course and some of this stuff, and Bread Fan and some of those songs. But I'd never actually like dove into their albums and checked out each one and really, picked them apart. And I want to thank everybody because I really enjoyed putting this together. I really enjoyed exploring their albums and learning more about Budgie. And now I can definitely say I'm a fan. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.